I hate propaganda. And this is all I've been seeing for the last, I guess it's maybe 2 or 3 years now. EFI conversion this, EFI conversion that. Gotta swap to EFI, it's so much better. Let me start by saying this, right? I am no stranger to EFI. I was racing EFI cars back in the 1980s. I was one of the first in the pool. I was on the EFI bandwagon. And I still respect EFI. I understand it. I work with it. I have no problems with it, with EFI itself. I have no problem with a car that was born with the EFI remaining EFI and doing all of the EFI things that need to be done with it. I'm not against technology. I'm not a Neanderthal, right? But what I am is a practical, hands-on mechanic. I'm a mechanic, right? So the propaganda has all been tilted against the carburetor. What's happened over the last couple of years, if you notice, right? Every show on TV, as soon as they're going to start working on a car, oh, we need to upgrade it to EFI. Every YouTube channels, constantly, right? Upgrade to EFI. And the reason for this is because the manufacturers are giving these things away like candy. Oh, you have a channel, you got more than 10,000 subscribers. Here, have an EFI system, right? So these guys are all doing EFI swaps. And the thing that got me fired up on this is one of the channels that I watch regularly, I'm not going to mention it, did an EFI upgrade thing on a small block Ford, right? And it was so tilted and it was so jaded. Like the carburetor was never given a chance. It was the car originally, you know, as the engine as it came in, it was a dyno thing, right? The engine as it came in was obviously poorly set up and probably had an undersized carburetor on it. And it got dismal numbers on the dyno. So then they put the EFI on it and they gave it all of the benefits that would go with that. And obviously it made more power. And to the unthinking, you know, to the people who don't know, it looks like an obvious no-brainer. Oh, look how much better the EFI is. But it's not true. The carburetor was never given a chance. Even the difference in CFM between the carburetor that was on there and the EFI, there was, you know, a big difference in the amount of air this thing could flow. But that's all besides the point. There's a time and a place to do an EFI conversion, okay? The people who I would see this appealing to, right, are the ones that are completely hands-off. They have a mechanic, they bring their car, their hot rod, right, to a mechanic. They go to Cars and Coffee, they sit in a lawn chair, and all they care about is they're going to turn the key and it's going to start and it's going to go, right? If you're capable of pumping the gas 2 or 3 times before you turn the key and feathering the throttle for, you know, 30 seconds before the thing actually warms up, or even have, you know, just a well-operating choke, okay? If you're capable of going into a carburetor and making fine-tuning adjustments, you know, to the part throttle circuits and to the full throttle, you know, jet changes and whatnot, then you don't need EFI. EFI is not a benefit. And ultimately, at the end of the rainbow, the carburetor will still make more horsepower if it's tuned correctly. And it's a simple dynamic of the atomization process. As the fuel is pulled through the booster, the atomization process drops the temperature of the fuel and the incoming air charge. That leads to a denser mixture entering into the chamber. By its very nature, EFI is a pressure operated system. The pressure raises the temperature. There's no atomization at the nozzle, there's a spray at the nozzle. So that temperature drop never happens. So ultimately, a properly tuned and jetted carburetor will make more power ultimately than an EFI system. But again, see, the world right now is just bent on having you buy these EFI systems. You know, and there's a couple of major manufacturers, you know, one in particular that has sponsored everything across the board, you know, to flood the market with these EFI systems. And I find it discouraging because the other side of the story is never given. The benefits of the carburetor are never extolled. They're like, okay, oh, it's a primitive thing, you know, it's like, that's caveman stuff. A carburetor can never perform as well as EFI can. Wrong. EFI can compensate for altitude, and yeah, I get that, right? But if you've gone through a carburetor, if you've taken the time to learn your carburetor and go through the carburetor and not only have the proper jetting, right, but the proper barrel valve or the proper drop rods and springs and what, you know, depending on the type of carburetor you're working with, These things work nearly flawlessly. I daily drive carburetors all the time. All my cars are carbureted. I have no problem. They start, they run, they get good gas mileage, they make good power overall. I have no complaints. Ultimately, like the choice is yours, but I have to say something in favor of the other side because I never see anybody, again, propaganda, you know what I mean? The system is based against the carburetor. So, here's a shot from the other side. And so what we're going to do is next, we're going to do a couple of videos, right, on basic carburetor tuning, so that you guys that aren't drinking the Kool-Aid, right, and you're like, yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate my car. I don't want to be, that's the other thing. You convert to an EFI system. It's one thing if your car was born with EFI. If there's an issue with it, all right, you can track down the part. You can go to the dealer or the auto parts store or whatever, get the part, plug it in. They have a normal sequence of troubleshooting and parts availability. When you're dealing with an aftermarket EFI system, you're a slave to that manufacturer. When something goes wrong with it, something goes wrong with a carburetor, they can generally be fixed on the side of the road. They can generally be fixed on the fly. They can be troubleshooted and diagnosed with just basic hand tools and the computer that's between your brain. When something goes wrong with one of these aftermarket EFI systems, you're shit out of luck. It's hope they'll accept a return on it. I'm ranting, right? I don't want to rant, but I do have to, speak up for the other side. And we're gonna do a lot of carburetor tuning videos to show you guys that, yes, EFI does have certain advantages, but the carburetor also has certain advantages. And in my mind, those advantages outweigh anything you can get for a conversion. See you tomorrow.